Why is it that you have prayed with sincerity, with tears, with desperation, and yet heaven felt silent? Why have you spoken the words you were taught, repeated the prayers you memorized, followed the formulas passed down through generations, and still watched miracles happen for others while your situation remained unchanged? There is a quiet ache that forms in the soul when faith is present, but power seems absent. An ache that makes you wonder if you are missing something no one ever told you. Jesus healed the sick, opened blind eyes, calmed storms, multiplied bread and raised the dead. But before every miracle, there was something that rarely gets talked about. Not a public spectacle, not a dramatic declaration, not a long, eloquent prayer designed to impress listeners. There was a posture, a way of speaking to the Father, a spiritual alignment that most believers were never taught to recognize, let alone practice. What if the issue was never your faith, but the way you were taught to pray? What if the prayer Jesus used before miracles was not hidden because it was complicated, but because it was too simple, too intimate, too confrontational to religious systems built on repetition rather than relationship? What if the most powerful prayer in Scripture was not a set of words, but a spiritual position of sonship that threatens everything transactional about religion? Many were taught how to ask God for things, but not how Jesus stood before the Father. Many learned how to beg, but not how to agree. Many were shown how to plead, but not how to align their will with heaven's authority. And so prayers became long, heavy, exhausting. While Jesus would lift his eyes, speak a few words, and impossibilities would collapse. Tonight, this is not about learning a new religious technique. This is about uncovering a forgotten pattern, a prayer posture Jesus used before power was released. And once you see it, you will never pray the same way again. There is a reason the Gospels do not record Jesus praying the way most people pray today. He did not negotiate with God. He did not convince the Father to care. He did not recite spiritual poetry to stir emotion. Instead, Jesus prayed from a place of absolute intimacy and certainty, an unbroken awareness that heaven was already aligned with his obedience. When Jesus stood before Lazarus's tomb, he did not cry out in panic. He did not plead for power to come down. He said something that should unsettle every believer who thinks prayer is about persuasion. He said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I knew that you always hear me." That was not confidence born from results. That was relationship speaking before the miracle happened. What most people were never taught is that Jesus' miracles flowed from a prayer life rooted in silence, surrender, and alignment, not noise, striving, or repetition. Long before bread multiplied in his hands, Jesus withdrew to lonely places. Long before demons fled, he spent nights alone with the Father. The public power was born in private intimacy. But intimacy does not perform well in religious systems built on visibility and control, so it was slowly replaced with formulas. This is why so many believers feel exhausted after praying. Their prayers are full of effort but empty of rest, full of words but lacking agreement. Jesus did not pray to change God's mind. He prayed because his mind was already aligned with the Father's will. And that alignment released authority. If you have ever felt like God went quiet, like your prayers were hitting a ceiling, like your faith was present but clarity was missing, you are not broken. You were simply never shown how to listen before you speak. You were taught how to ask, but not how to abide, how to request, but not how to remain. That is why so many people are being drawn to resources that bring them back to the stillness where God actually speaks. One of those is the devotional When God is Silent, linked in the pinned comment. It is not about chasing emotional highs. It is about learning to recognize God's voice when he is not dramatic, when he is quiet, when he is shaping you beneath the surface. Because silence is not absence. Silence is often preparation. Jesus did not fear silence. He embraced it. And out of that silence came authority that shook cities and rewrote destinies. What you are about to understand is not a secret prayer hidden from believers. It is a posture that was neglected because it cannot be controlled, packaged, or mass-produced. And once it takes root in your life, prayer will no longer feel like effort. It will feel like alignment. Before we go any further, pause for a moment, not as a digital action, but as a spiritual declaration. If your heart is hungry to pray the way Jesus prayed, not with fear or striving, but with intimacy and authority, then let that hunger be expressed. If this message is already stirring something in you, let that stirring turn into agreement. Gently press, like as an act of alignment, not for a platform, but as a sign that your spirit recognizes truth when it hears it. And in the comments, write these simple words: teach me to pray like Jesus, not as a performance, but as a prayer. Share this message with someone who has been praying faithfully but feeling empty, someone who loves God but is tired of formulas that no longer bring life. Sometimes God answers prayers by placing truth in someone else's hands and trusting them to pass it on. As you do that, open your heart, because what comes next is not theory. It is a story that reveals how Jesus lived, prayed, and walked in power, not to impress crowds, but to remain aligned with the Father when everything around him demanded urgency, pressure, and noise. And in that story, you may recognize yourself more than you expect. There is a moment in the life of Jesus that most people read past too quickly because it feels ordinary, almost unremarkable compared to the miracles that surround it. Yet hidden inside that moment is the pattern that explains everything. The crowds were growing, the sick were lining up, the disciples were finally feeling important. Momentum was building, and by every human metric, this was the season to capitalize. This was the moment to stay visible, stay accessible, stay productive, but instead, Scripture says something that feels almost disruptive. Jesus withdrew. Not because he was afraid, not because he was overwhelmed, but because intimacy with the Father mattered more than demand from the people. Imagine the scene. The sun has not fully risen, the world is quiet, the disciples are still asleep, dreaming of what the day might bring, and Jesus slips away, not to plan strategy, not to rehearse sermons, but to be alone with the Father. No audience, no urgency, no performance, just silence, breath, presence. This is where the kind of prayer Jesus prayed begins, not with words, but with withdrawal. Later that day, they come to him frantic. Everyone is looking for you, they say. In other words, the need is urgent, the opportunity is now, the pressure is real. And yet, Jesus is unshaken. Because what he received in secret anchored him more deeply than the expectations of the crowd ever could. Now consider another moment. Jesus stands before the tomb of Lazarus. Death is not theoretical here. It is final. The grief is raw. The disappointment is loud. People are not just sad, they are confused. They had faith. They sent for Jesus. They believed he would come, and he delayed. This delay is important. Jesus did not arrive late because he was careless. He arrived late because resurrection requires a deeper revelation than healing, and revelation always costs time. Before he speaks life, Jesus prays, but listen closely to what he says. He does not ask the Father to raise Lazarus. He does not beg heaven to intervene. He thanks the Father for hearing him, and then says something astonishing. "I knew that you always hear me." That sentence reveals everything. Jesus prayed from a place of certainty, not desperation, agreement, not anxiety, union, not distance. His prayer was not about getting God to act. It was about revealing what God was already doing. And then he cried out, "Lazarus, come forth." Not because power suddenly arrived, but because authority had already been established. This is the prayer you were never taught. Not the prayer of panic, not the prayer of bargaining, not the prayer of religious effort, but the prayer of alignment. The prayer that says, "Father, I am with you before I act for you." Even in Gethsemane, when agony pressed him to the ground and sweat fell like blood, Jesus did not pray for escape. He prayed for alignment. "Not my will, but yours be done." That was not weakness. That was the deepest expression of sonship. And because he aligned his will before the cross, resurrection power followed the grave. Here is what religion rarely teaches you. Miracles are not born from intensity alone. They are born from intimacy. And intimacy is formed when you learn to remain with God even when there is nothing to fix, nothing to prove, nothing to ask. Jesus did not rush prayer. He returned to it. He did not use prayer to fill silence. He used silence to deepen prayer. And that is why his words carried weight. Because they came from a life that listened, there is a parable hidden inside all of this, a quiet one that mirrors our own lives. Imagine a son who works tirelessly in his father's fields. He rises early, he stays late, he does everything right. But every time he speaks to his father, it is to ask for permission, to request provision, to seek approval. He never sits at the table, never rests in the house, never speaks as one who belongs. Now imagine another son. He knows the field, but he also knows the house. He listens before he speaks. He understands the heart of his father, not just the rules of the land. When he acts with confidence, not because he is entitled, but because he is aligned. Which son carries authority? Many believers were taught to live in the field, but not in the house. They were taught how to serve God, but not how to abide, how to speak to God, but not how to listen, how to ask for miracles, but not how to carry presence. Jesus carried presence, and miracles followed. This is why his prayers were short, why his words were few, why his authority was unquestioned. He was not reaching for heaven. Heaven was already within reach. And the invitation has always been the same, not to pray harder, not to say more, but to come closer, to withdraw before you act, to listen before you speak, to align before you ask, because the prayer Jesus used before miracles was not hidden in heaven. It was lived on earth, and it is still available to those willing to slow down enough to receive it. This is where the misunderstanding of prayer begins to unravel, because what Jesus modeled was not only spiritual truth, but deep psychological wisdom woven into divine order. Scripture and the human soul are not in conflict. They echo each other. Jesus said, "Abide in me and I in you." As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you. That word abide does not mean visit occasionally. It means remain, stay, make your home there. And here is the insight most people miss. Fruit is not produced by effort. Fruit is produced by connection. Modern psychology tells us that anxiety increases when control is lost and identity is threatened. When people feel disconnected from a secure attachment, they overcompensate with words, actions, and intensity. That is exactly what many prayers have become. Spiritual overcompensation rooted in insecurity, not because people lack faith, but because they were never taught to anchor their identity before they speak. Jesus never prayed from insecurity. When he was baptized, before he healed anyone, before he preached a single sermon, before he proved anything, a voice came from heaven. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." That declaration came before performance. Identity preceded activity. And immediately after that moment, Jesus was led into the wilderness, not to lose that identity, but to test whether he would cling to it without affirmation. The devil's first temptation was not about power, it was about identity. "If you are the Son of God," in other words, prove it. Jesus refused. Why? Because people who know who they are do not need to prove it, and people who pray from identity do not beg for authority. They walk in it. This is why Jesus warned against praying like the Pharisees, who loved many words and public displays. He was not condemning prayer. He was exposing insecurity masquerading as spirituality. He said, "Your Father knows what you need before you ask Him." That statement alone dismantles panic-driven prayer. If the Father already knows, then prayer is not about informing God. It is about forming you. Prayer aligns the soul. Psychologically, stillness regulates the nervous system. Spiritually, stillness sharpens discernment. "Be still and know that I am God" is not poetic language, it is instruction. Stillness precedes knowing. Silence precedes clarity. Alignment precedes authority. Jesus understood this intuitively and spiritually. That is why he often responded to chaos with calm. Storms did not dictate his internal state. Crowds did not rush his spirit. Death itself did not intimidate his words. And when he taught his disciples to pray, he did not begin with requests. He began with orientation. "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name." Before daily bread, before forgiveness, before deliverance, identity and alignment came first. That prayer was never meant to be recited mindlessly. It was meant to re-center the soul into sonship. Notice this: your kingdom come, your will be done. That is alignment language. That is not demand. That is surrender. That is the prayer Jesus lived, not just spoke. From a psychological lens, people who surrender control paradoxically gain peace. From a spiritual lens, people who surrender their will gain authority. The cross was not defeat, it was alignment to the highest degree, and resurrection followed. This is why your prayers may have felt heavy. You were carrying responsibility that was never yours, trying to control outcomes, trying to manage God, trying to force timing. Jesus never did that. He trusted the Father's heart more than he feared outcomes, and that trust freed him to speak with clarity when the moment came. Prayer, then, is not a lever you pull to move God. It is a place you enter to be moved by God. When that shift happens, when prayer becomes communion rather than transaction, your words change. Your tone changes, your expectations change, and often your circumstances eventually follow. Not because you mastered a formula, but because you finally learned to rest in alignment. And that rest is where miracles are conceived long before they are seen. There is a quiet invitation being extended to you right now, and it is not loud or forceful. It is gentle, steady, and deeply personal. It is the invitation to come out of striving and into alignment. To stop measuring your spiritual life by how intense your prayers sound and begin recognizing the authority that flows when your heart rests in God. You are not behind. You are not disqualified. You have not missed your moment. The frustration you have felt in prayer was not a sign of failure. It was a signal that God was calling you deeper, away from noise, away from performance, away from the exhausting belief that you must say the right words to unlock heaven. Heaven has never been locked against a son or daughter who abides. There is a season opening before you where God is not asking you to do more, but to listen longer. Not to speak louder, but to stay closer. You are being invited to withdraw before you advance, to sit before you stand, to align before you act. And in that alignment, things that once felt impossible will begin to shift, not always instantly, but decisively. Some of you have been carrying prayers that feel unanswered, not because God ignored them, but because He is reshaping you into someone who can carry the answer without being crushed by it. Authority without intimacy destroys. Power without alignment corrupts, but God trusts you enough to slow you down before He lifts you up. I sense that many listening have been faithful in the field, but are now being invited into the house. You have served. You have endured. You have obeyed even when it was costly. And now the Father is saying, "Come sit with me. Let me remind you who you are before you do anything else." Your prayers are about to change, not in length, but in weight, not in volume, but in clarity. There will be moments when a single sentence, spoken from rest, will carry more authority than hours of anxious pleading ever did. You will begin to sense when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to wait. And that discernment will protect you from burnout and guide you into fruitfulness. Do not be afraid of the quiet seasons. God does some of his deepest work there. Roots grow in darkness, alignment forms in stillness. And when the time comes to speak, your words will not be rushed, they will be ripe. You were never meant to chase miracles. You were meant to walk with God, and as you do, signs will follow, not because you demanded them, but because heaven responds naturally to a life in agreement. This is your invitation back to simplicity, back to sonship, back to prayer that feels like home. And what God is about to do through you will not come from striving, but from staying. Stay with him, rest in him, align with him, and watch how power flows naturally from intimacy. If you are still here, thank you. Not just for staying to the end of a video, but for staying present with a truth that does not rush you, flatter you, or entertain you, but invites you deeper. That alone tells me something about your heart. People who remain when the message slows down are often the ones God trusts with greater depth. Before you leave, I want you to seal this moment, not emotionally, but intentionally. In the comments, write these words: I choose alignment over striving. Let it be a declaration, a reminder you can return to on the days when prayer feels heavy again, when the urge to perform creeps back in, when silence feels uncomfortable. This is not about perfection, it is about direction. If this message resonated with you, gently press like, not to support a channel, but to mark this moment as one where truth found you. And share this with someone who loves God deeply, but has been exhausted by prayer. Someone who needs permission to rest without guilt. Sometimes sharing is not about sending content, it is about sending hope. If you have not yet subscribed, consider doing so, not out of obligation, but as a way of choosing to walk consistently in messages that call you back to intimacy, depth, and spiritual clarity. This community exists to remind you that faith is not a performance, it is a relationship. You can also hype this video if it blessed you, helping it reach others who may be silently struggling with the same questions you once carried. And if you feel led to go further, you are invited to become a member or support the channel through Super Thanks. Every act of support helps keep these messages available for those who are searching in quiet places. If you find yourself in a season where God feels silent, remember the devotional When God is Silent in the pinned comment. It was created for moments just like this, not to give you louder answers, but to help you recognize God's presence in the quiet. Above all, remember this: you were never meant to master prayer. You were meant to live in alignment, to walk with God, not chase him, to listen as much as you speak, to rest as deeply as you trust. Thank you for walking this moment with me. Keep walking with God.